Welcome, everyone, to Reclamation, a beEmboldened initiative. I am Naomi, the founder and executive director here at BE, and we exist for those impacted by spiritual abuse by providing support for the prevention of victimization and revictimization. We desire to create a safe place to ask the questions, the hard questions, to heal and to rebuild. And today, I am so thankful to bring you a personal survivor story. Erin is my special guest today, and we became acquainted through a mutual acquaintance, and we're able to grow our relationship, get to know more about one another's stories. And something I appreciate so much about Erin's story is how it's going to connect with many of you who have experienced spiritual abuse in an organization, as in you were on staff, that kind of environment. And there are some nuances to this kind of experience that can be a bit different from someone who was, say, a part of congregation versus someone who's experienced spiritual abuse in the home. And so Erin's here to share her story with us of what spiritual abuse looked like for her working in a Christian organization that was not a church. And so, Erin, thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful for your willingness to share your story. I know it's always such a personal decision to do so, and I am already anticipating how what you're about to share today is going to resonate with our listeners. So to jump right in, I'm going to ask you our first question. What type of organization were you affiliated with, and what was your connection with them?
So it was a large Christian school in the area, and I was a teacher in the school. My job was to teach freshmen the skills they would need in order to be successful for the next 4 years of high school and beyond. So having my doctorate in communication, it was a good fit because I knew how to communicate to them the skills they would need in order to be successful. And I think it really did that in the end.
Yeah, what a neat position too.
It was a perfect fit for me.
Yeah. It sounds a little intimidating to me, but I also feel like it could be fun. But yes, it needs the right person.
It was fun. And I learned a lot doing it. I think I got better as I did it. And I also was part of a great team. There were 5 of us doing it. So that helped also to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. How long had you been on staff?
So I was on staff for 2.5 years before things really turned down and went a really difficult direction.
Okay. And may I ask how did the job kind of be? Did you have a connection with the school prior to? Like, was there any sort of relationship prior to actually taking the job?
I had a relationship with another teacher who had taught there, and it was just a couple different God circumstances where I ran into her, like trick-or-treating or something else. And she said, go to this school and apply there. They kind of think uniquely about the type of people they hire, and you might be a really good fit there. And so I had applied for another job. I had all my materials in place and they weren't interested. So I thought, I'm going to do what this young lady had said. And I put my information out to this school and they hired me right away.
Okay. All right. So you had heard good things, had heard that you'd probably be a good fit. Obviously, were a good fit, got the position. You're there for 2.5 years, and you've spoken very highly of your colleagues so far. So what was your relationship like with them?
My team members were amazing. I thought we worked really well as a highly effective team. I've studied teams. I know what makes for effective teams. There wasn't anybody that was really trying to, be all that. We were just trying to help each other out and be really effective in what it was we were doing. We were supportive of each other, encouraging of each other, and just really a great team to serve on. I thought there were a lot of creative thinkers in there. And I will say that I taught only women. And there was another female teacher who taught women. And then there were a couple of male teachers who taught men. And then there was our lead who taught both men and women. So it was a really unique niche.
Mm-hmm. And how about with your students?
Well, they were high schoolers. So freshmen in high school. And they came with that mix of kind of wanting to be all that in high school now and wanting to have that independence with also having a little fear and trepidation because they were new and they didn't know the ropes yet and they were figuring a lot out. And so I kind of viewed my position as being a bridge between when you're home and your mother's helping to manage a lot of stuff in your life, to then you get to high school and you don't want her involved anymore, or your dad involved anymore. You want to make these choices for yourself. And I think this program was really good because it put a person in that position who could help follow up with things with the parents and with the students, while also allowing the student to fly and kind of test their wings a little bit. So I was really engaged in making sure that the students could remain eligible and do those extracurriculars that they loved at the school, while also getting done the academics that they would need in order to be successful and graduate in 4 years.
Because this was a standalone 9 through 12 Christian high school, right? They weren't coming up from a middle school that was a part of the district. So it was really a whole new world.
That's right. There were more than 80 different feeder schools that came into this high school. And so they came at all different levels of learning. Different middle schools would focus on different things. And so it was up to me and my colleagues to really look at where were the learning gaps and where would they need to be developed as individuals, not just even as a class, as individuals in order to be successful. So we really had our eyes on each one of them and what their individual needs were.
Wow. Yeah, Erin, even hearing that as a model would pique my interest for my child, because it just sounds so informed and caring and supportive in response to the information. So it sounds really good.
I did a lot of recruiting for the school as part of my job, just volunteering to recruit. And that's one of the ways that I would sell the school, in saying that there is this unique program. And though we're a large high school, your child's not going to fall through the cracks. We're going to see them, we're going to encourage them, we're going to equip them, and they're going to be successful. And so I think that's something we could use to differentiate from other schools in the areas in a very competitive market.
Sure. So all this is sounding good so far, but what happened?
Well, in April of 2019, I had my performance evaluation with then the academic dean of the school and his assistant. And at that review, everything was so praiseworthy, and we're so blessed to have you, and we just can't believe we have you, and you're so great, and we're giving you the highest increase we can, which isn't much, it's 3%, but we just want you to know how much we love you and how much good you're doing here. So that actually was great to hear. And I laughed in the interview because I said, I get it. You like me, because it almost started to be so much like, I get it, but that also wasn't unique for me, because I'm an achiever. I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, and it's all about, hey, where's the bar? How can I meet it or exceed it? So I'm all about performing at my absolute best and doing what the organization needs in order to be successful. So while I loved those words, and I think those words of encouragement are so important, they also didn't surprise me, because yes, I was adding value. I could see I was adding value. And that was April.
You were confident. You had reason to be.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. And I really did feel like I was in my niche. And around that time, my lead of my department wanted to give up his chair position. So I said I would be willing to fill his chair position, and I applied for that position. And in the midst of all that, there was a change in leadership, where the academic dean who had just given me those rave reviews went to be the assistant of the high school, and his assistant took his spot. And then our department was transferred over to a new person who was in charge of academic support, and he became the dean of our department. So he was at that interview where I applied for the chair position, and I was kind of surprised that in the interview, he was kind of sitting back and not very engaged, and I just didn't really get a very good read from him. And even in the interview, he said he hadn't had time to read any of my application materials. And I thought that was kind of surprising, because as an achiever, I would make sure that I had read everything and was on top of the people that I was interviewing. And I was the only person interviewing for the position. Nobody else wanted it from my team.
Okay.
So afterwards, I went to my lead and he said, how did it go? And I go, it was really interesting, because it didn't seem like he had read my materials or was that into understanding me more as a candidate. And then I never heard back from him about whether or not I got the position. So a couple weeks later, I followed up with my own lead and said, I haven't heard back from this new dean. And he said, oh, they want me to stay in the position. They just want the continuity of that position. I thought, well, okay, that's okay, but I'm going to follow up with these other two deans just to make sure that there's not performance concerns that got in the way of me getting that position. And while I tried to schedule time with them or a meeting with them, nothing worked that spring. And I kept hearing the word from the assistant, well, now she was the academic dean. This person will get a hold of you. They'll let you know. This person will talk to you. Well, the person never did. So the following fall, I came back to school, not knowing why I didn't get that position, but just wanting to have a conversation to make sure there were no performance concerns. And so I scheduled a meeting with him. And at this point, he did have time. And I just said, well, can you help me to understand why I wasn't selected for chair of the department? And he said that he wanted to keep the continuity of the current leader because, well, he was learning so much, getting used to us as a new area of his responsibility. He liked that this person already knew what was going on. And so I received that and I accepted that. Again, as an achiever, I need to be okay with what the team wants and what's best for the team. Now I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I remained in the current position that I was in. The academic dean then got a hold of me and said, did you talk to this person? And did you find out what the reason was? And I said, yeah, he basically said he wanted to keep the continuity. And she said, well, would you like to meet with me? And I said, well, I don't really need to, but sure, I'll meet with you. And so I met with her too. And I said, I just wanted to make sure there weren't any performance concerns, because if there's any performance concerns, I'd like to address them. And she said, no, we just want to keep the continuity. And what did he say? And yep, that's all right. And so I'm thinking, again, things are great. We're fine. And so then in January, all of a sudden, my dean comes to me, my chair comes to me and says to me, these two individuals want to put you on a performance improvement plan, a PIP, as we call it in the human resource world.
Those two people that you had met with,
yeah,
had come to your person, your head, and said, okay.
In fact, he said to me, my chair said to me, they wanted to spring this on you, but I want to give you the heads up, which I'm so grateful he did, because I would have been completely devastated if they would have come to me and said this outright. Like, I had no time to even adjust to it. Having served as a human resource manager for Accenture, I have put people on performance improvement plans before. And these are the people that don't show up for work. They're late. They don't turn things in on time. And I'm just the opposite of that. I am uber conscious of what is being asked of me and making sure that it's done and doing it in a timely manner and all those things. So for me, I just could not even believe I was being put on a performance improvement plan, especially after they said there were no performance concerns just in September. And with it, not even 9 months earlier, I had received this evaluation that they were so thrilled about me and all my efforts and what I was contributing to the school. So this was just a complete change of thinking about my role in this organization and what I was contributing.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like a complete shock. I mean, he was giving you a heads up, but you were absolutely still blindsided.
Yeah. And at the time, they brought up a couple different things that they were concerned by. And so I said, okay, great. Put me on this performance improvement plan. If it helps my student evaluations to get stronger, great. I had been inviting them since day one of my teaching to come and visit and give any feedback they would like to me and to the way I was teaching. So it wasn't that I wasn't asking for feedback. I thought that'd be lovely. But I also knew I was in a unique position because, again, my job was to help these students to be successful in the school. And that meant following up on work that wasn't being turned in, working with teachers who knew that these students were struggling with low grades in their school, what support in their subjects, what support services could we get for them. So in a way, I didn't expect to be their best friend right off the bat. I was in a way kind of functioning as their mom or their parent, making sure that things were getting done. Now, I said to them at the time when they initiated the PIP, this is often how it goes in the fall. Like, my evaluations are lower in the fall, but I think if you check in the spring, you're going to see that my evaluations are much higher, because they see that I'm not trying to do this to be mean. I'm doing this to walk alongside them and help them to be successful. So if you test again in the spring, I think you'll see my evaluations are much higher. And so they agreed to do that as part of the performance improvement plan.
Well, and that we're going to get to the rest, but at that point I would be thinking, okay, like they're understanding, it makes sense that performance and like that, or now the performance improvement, that your, what were they called? The reviews that you got, the feedback, the evaluations.
Student evaluations.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It makes sense. I mean, I think about my child. I know you're a mom. It's like, no, when I tell my child he can't have all the sugar he wants in a day, he's not happy with me, but it's in his best interest not to eat all of the sugar in a day. So this is going to happen with students where it's okay. This is the one who's really going to help elevate me, because I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that a private Christian school has high expectations for their kiddos.
It does. So, and remaining eligible is a real thing, you know? And so if you want to play lacrosse, you have to have a grade point of this, or you're not going to be able to do it. And so I was there in order to help them to achieve the grade point they needed in order to play the sport or be in the performance that they wanted to. Right. So absolutely. And they also did the teaching evaluations like 6 weeks into school. So it was, I had just met them. And then by October, they were filling out a form about whether they liked me or not. So it was a tough road to hoe. And I did also form a lot of relationships with them. And I think they really did like me. But as far as, you know, the class, were they wild about the class? Not so much right off the bat.
Sure. And it sounds fair. Okay. So then how did it go in the spring?
Well, so the part of the performance improvement plan was that each of these people, my chair and then the 2 deans, would visit my classroom 2 times and offer me feedback about what I could do in order to essentially be liked better by the students. And so they each visited me 2 times, and they each gave me written feedback about what I could do, which I incorporated into the classroom. But I noticed that the lead dean, some of the things he was saying were just not, I incorporated them, but they seemed kind of silly. So for example, one day we did speed dating the Enneagram. And so I put the 9 different Enneagrams around on all the desks in a circle. And it was their job to go around and meet each of the Enneagrams, read a little bit about it, and see if it was a fit for them. And then in order to debrief afterwards, we sat on the floor since the Enneagrams were on all of the tables. Well, his feedback to me was, don't make high schoolers sit on the floor. They don't like to sit on the floor. So I thought, okay, mental note to self, don't have high schoolers sit on the floor. However, from a socio-emotional perspective, that can be very grounding to be on the floor. So, you know, I took his words and I incorporated them, but I also didn't necessarily 100% agree with them. In addition, he would say stuff like, and don't have them answer in a circle. Like they don't each need to give a response in a circle, which sometimes that's a way of getting around and getting a response from everybody. And I can see other times you can jump around, but okay, I won't do things in order in a circle. That's fine. The third thing he said to me that was somewhat concerning is he said to me, and there's just something about your voice. There's just something about your voice. And that's the one that I really was like, my voice. I'm having trouble with that one because as a speech communication teacher, well-versed in public speaking, I know that to change somebody's voice is no small effort. And I wasn't sure what he was meaning, that there was something wrong with my voice. And so that's something that I took a mental note of as far as I'm going to need to follow up with that later, because I don't know what I could do to change my voice. I know sometimes my other lead would say, well, sometimes you bring too much energy and you get the students too riled up. And then sometimes he would visit my class and say, sometimes you're just too quiet and too calm and you need to go more off their energy. So I felt like there was no way I could, kind of become the person they wanted me to be in order to always have the students happy and enthused. So maybe that was the piece about the voice, but I was really confused about that. And that's where it really started to attack my personhood and who I
Right.
was as a professional.
Well, and that's so, I have to just jump in and say it's so incredibly inappropriate. I I don't see how I could draw a difference between that and like commenting on like I have brown hair or my size or anything else that would be so inappropriate to comment on. If someone was like, "Oh, well, Naomi, I don't know about your nose. It's just as distracting." Like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't get to comment on my physical self in that way. Like, that's off limits. And our voice is in the same realm. And so I just hear that as being
Yeah.
so incredibly inappropriate. And it does make me wonder, which is what does not excuse any of this behavior at all. I'm just wondering if you can say, were the parents really difficult to please? Like, was there something going on with like parent pushback and they were yielding
Not
to
that
it even though they should not have?
Not that I know of. And from what I could tell, like, I started gathering all the feedback I was getting from parents, and it was really positive. Like, one time I
Okay.
caught my student plagiarizing on a little essay she was supposed to write. And it was so obvious that she had completely copied, or somebody had completely copied her
Okay.
from a different class. And so I made her aware of it, and I told her that I would have to make her parent aware of it. And the parent came in all, like, oh. And we had a conversation with the girl about, looks like you plagiarized this paper. And she came forth and she said, in the end, yes, I did, because it was so obvious, it was just word for word for several paragraphs.
Oh, wow.
And the mom afterwards said, wow, you're really good at what you do. And the reason is because I pointed out to the young lady that, right here at this level, 9th grade, freshman year, this is just a warning. You can't do this. You can't get away with it. There's tools that are going to catch this, because when you enter college, this is going to be caught and you could be thrown out of the class. You can lose the grade for the paper. You can, this gets to be much more of a consequence down the road. So I'm warning you right now not to do this anymore. Don't give, and in this case, the young lady unfortunately had shared her paper with somebody else, and that other individual had copied it. But, I said, you're held accountable as well as that other student. So it's a life lesson of kind of, again, how are you going to be successful going forward? Don't share your work. So anyways, I had parent comments like that throughout that would just be like, wow, you're really good at this. And a model in the school was, because it was a Christian school, to go first to the person that you have the conflict with and talk to them directly. And so if there were other parents concerned, the administration's role should have been to have those parents go and speak to me directly. Like, I never got to hear from any of these parents that were disgruntled, if there were those.
Right.
What I was hearing was very positive. A student, in the midst of me having these supposedly low teaching evaluations, chose me in the fall as her teacher of the year to go out to the softball field with her and receive a softball that said, hey,
goodness.
thank you so much for being in my life and making a difference. So It was very confusing. Like, why is so much weight being put on the evaluations for this class versus really what I'm hearing in these notes of encouragement that I'm getting from students and their parents? So that was very confusing.
And it sounds, Erin, like you really care and chose to invest in the character development of these students. And we need that. We need that in society, period. Absolutely, biblically, we are called to be focusing on character development in our children and in one another, and desiring for that growth and that sanctification process, once we've accepted Jesus. And that's a huge win. I mean, I would want my son with a teacher like you, who was going to, in a loving, kind way, hold him accountable and equip him to make better decisions moving forward. And that's a risk to do. I know that feeling of like, I'm going to say something that's going to be hard, but I have to say it, and I can say it in a good way. It has to be said. And I think what I've seen sometimes, having a son in a private Christian school, if I may, as a parent, and I know that you've had your kids, so I know you'll get this yourself. there can be times where it feels like there's almost too much power that can be offered to the parents because they're writing the checks. And so that's why I had brought that up. I was like, I don't want to project it, just kind of curious. And I would maintain, though, that it would be a failure on leadership to submit to just whatever parental whims are going on. Like, we have to know what our values are. And in a Christian school, they have to be biblically based values, and we have to hold to them, even if we lost a student or two because a parent didn't like that their child, for example, wasn't able to plagiarize, which wasn't how that story went down. But had the parent been upset, I mean, we would have to still hold to that level of character. So again, I just love what I'm hearing of how you were handling these situations. But you're hearing this back and forth. You're getting sort of this double-sided, like, be more energetic, be less energetic, don't sit on the floor. Something's wrong with your voice. Did this continue to deteriorate from there?
Yeah, so it did. Meanwhile, I'm trying to be the, best I can be in these students' lives. And what I really felt like I was doing was shepherding them as individuals. And so I continued to do that with, well, how come so many people come and visit our class? And I would just say, oh, they're interested in the way that I teach and are going to offer me suggestions that they might have. So don't worry about it. Let's just keep going forward with what we're learning. And so they came there 6 times, and then COVID struck and we all went remote. Okay. And because of the excellence of this school, we went online almost immediately. They were just able to not miss a beat, and maybe a week or two of school, and then we were full-time online. And what was so great about this role that I was in is that I was already in there to follow up on the social emotional health of the students, to follow up on missing assignments, to make sure they were getting their work done, to mourn with them over the losses that they were experiencing, and to laugh with them about how we were coming to class and getting it done anyways. So, I mean, this course was really something that could have been packaged and shared with others. There was a definite check-in that everybody was there and everybody was getting it done. And and these were all recorded. So I had, 30 plus hours each week of recorded teaching time that could have been watched and observed, and they could have seen how I was doing and how successful I was in the classroom. But April 26th came around, and that should have been the end of my performance improvement plan. And I heard nothing. So I assumed that it was just over. And my lead followed up with me a few weeks later, and he said, how's it going with the PIP? And I said, well, I guess it's over, because I just never heard back any more of it. And April 26th came and went, and you guys all had your 6 visits, and I incorporated what you needed to in the classroom. And he then let me know that, no, this dean actually wanted to extend the PIP for the rest of the year. So I would be coming back in the fall and still be on this performance improvement plan, because supposedly he didn't have enough information. And so I then called an immediate conference call with the then assistant head of the school, these 2 deans, and then my chair. I said, we have to talk about this, because this is having a toll on me. And we went to that online meeting, but the assistant head of school did not come. He said he thought these 2 deans could handle it. And they weren't handling it. They were destroying me. He said he would watch later the video, and I hope he watched it. I think the one dean just pulled out a little section to show him. But in that call, the dean that was really the driving force of my performance improvement plan said, you need to come to trust us. And if you can't trust us, you just need to leave. And I said, I am having a hard time trusting you, because I asked you directly for feedback about my performance, and you said there were no concerns. And then all of a sudden I'm on a performance improvement plan. And then you say this plan's going to last for this length of time, and then you extend it without ever talking to me about it. I'm just having a hard time trusting your words. And I said, I don't want to leave my job, because I love my job. I love what I'm doing. It's a great niche for me. I love these women I'm serving. I don't want to leave it, but this is killing me. And it didn't matter. The plan was I would continue on this well into the new year. And then in December, I would hear whether or not they were going to extend a contract to me for the next year. As a matter of fact, it was set up at that point that if they were not pleased with me in December, I would be gone. So I had to start a new school year and meet a new batch of girls, not knowing if I'd be able to complete the year with them. Again, just a really devastating position to be in, like form relationships, but we don't know if they'll last. So it was just really discouraging. And we went back with masks on and all separating from each other. And I just felt so alone. It was just incredibly difficult. Well, I continued to perform in the classroom and achieve all the goals I had set for my students and our team had set for these kids. It was just really hard to show up and not be fragile. But I would do it. And then when I was at home or when I was in a meeting with these people that were running my PIP, I would break down. I would just collapse. And there was a time when a social emotional counselor within the school came to me and she said, "Erin, can I meet with you a minute?" And I'm going to cry as I say this, but I went up to her office and she said to me, "Erin, the Lord spoke to me that I need to share this with you, that what you are going through is trauma." And when she said that, I just burst into tears because I had no idea. I had no word to kind of put on the feeling that my body was having, why I was so fragile and broken and just not able to handle things in a whole way anymore. And she said, that's the result of trauma. And once I knew that, then I could kind of put all the pieces together for what was happening to me. But up until that point, strangely enough, I just had never had an experience like this in my life. I was used to performing and pleasing and being able to rise to people's expectations and moving on. And so that just really helped me. I'm just so thankful for her words, even to this day. And then that helped me to also think about how can I make sure that I'm taking care of myself in this process of being so demoralized and destroyed by others.
Yes, the language is so powerful. And I hear that often of when people are looking at, did I experience spiritual abuse? And they start to hear more about it. And they're like, oh my goodness. And that's a huge step. There's such a relief to it, even though we then step into all the emotions fully. There's a relief to it. Okay, at least I can start to make sense and have some sort of framework for the nightmare that I've lived through and find other people who can then come alongside me and are going to get it. And it sounds like she got it, whether directly from the exact same kind of scenario or just being informed the way she was in her position and her kindness and coming and sharing that with you. And I think something that's standing out to me in your story of what you've experienced is the crazy ambiguity of continuing on. I mean, huge lack of communication. Also, the communication you are having, I'm not hearing like benchmarks of, I need you to hit this, this, and this in order to stay on. I've done hiring and firing before. I've put people on it, performance improvement plans, and it's a whole written out document of here are the concerns, here are the expectations, here's what we need to see by when. Fully informed, everybody signs it. There's check-ins, and I'm just not hearing any of this.
No, there were check-ins, and at these check-ins, they would always kind of run them the same way. It was very bizarre, again, coming from a human resource perspective. They would first ask me if there's anything I wanted to say. And so I didn't really have anything to respond to at this point because I didn't have anything ahead of time, but I would try to come up with something like, hey, you have this culture document. Is that important to you? Are you running this performance improvement plan according to this document? Or, as far as my concern with them being truthful, are we going to abide with being upfront with each other with what's really going on? And so I would try to say something like that up front, but I really had nothing else to comment on. Then they would hand out to me their written document, and I would get to see what their thoughts were for this session. And so I had asked him at one of these initial meetings, what are your questions that you might have? I had said to him, well, I still don't understand why this performance improvement plan was extended because, I did everything you asked me to do and you did your visits. And he said, well, I just didn't have enough information. I just didn't have enough time to observe. And I said, but I have had 30 hours of recorded time for 6 weeks of, home learning. And he said, well, I just didn't have time to watch it. So it kept being this message of, we don't have enough information for you, but the information is there. I just haven't looked at it. So that was really concerning because, again, I felt like my virtual learning was outstanding and it offered a lot to the students. And I thought there, would have been some, resolution based on that I'm handling the classroom well. So anyways, that was very concerning. And then when they would pass out the paperwork to me, it would say stuff like on the first page, we had hoped that Erin would come to trust us, but now we have little hope of that. So now I'm reading this thing in front of me that's supposed to be, how are we going to move forward? And they're saying there's little hope unless you can come to trust us. No apology for what the times they haven't been trustworthy in the past. No plan for how they can become more trustworthy, but just we had hoped she could come to trust us. So we have little hope of that. Or on the next page, it said, and now Erin is teaching better. She's now, which you would think is great, right? I'm teaching better. I did feel a little bit encouraged, but then they concluded that statement by saying she's now teaching at the average to below average level, which there's no way I would have ever even been hired at the school if I taught at the average to below average level. That was just a lie. That wasn't true. I was teaching very well. I was well equipped for the classroom and they were learning. So it was just mean and nasty. And there was somebody who was in the role of human resources. And I say that because it was a pretty new school, so that people grew into their roles by having been there in the beginning and then just continuing to fall into open positions as time went on. And so she was functioning in the role of human resources. And she said, I don't see why you wouldn't see that this individual's been encouraging. I mean, just look at this document and he produces this every time. And I said, but look at the words within the document. They're so destructive. They're not encouraging. They're not what your culture document says you stand for. And she was just beyond herself that I wouldn't see this as being encouraging when those words were so discouraging. So that too is just a really concerning factor. And then for her to be in that role and not hold up this culture document that listed all these things the school would stand for. And I highlighted about 20 of them that they were violating, such as getting timely feedback, being truth tellers, being encouragers. I had 8 pages that I had accumulated of just little emails and notes and things people had sent me over just while I had been on the pit. And you would think that one of them could have said, wow, it looks like you're really headed in the right direction. Keep doing this. And I think things will go well for you. No one ever commented on any of those words of encouragement that other people had given me. And when I asked the academic dean, why didn't you ever comment on these? And she said, there just wasn't enough to go on. And I thought, 8 pages of commendations, and there's not enough to come up with one word of encouragement that you could speak. That just was so against their own culture document.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. You're seeing the inconsistencies, like this is incongruent, and there's no willingness to meet you partway and say, okay, yeah, maybe this isn't great that we're extending a performance improvement plan over and over, just keeping you on it and that torture of not knowing. Because I want to restate this for anyone who is watching, listening to this conversation. At the end of it, you were going to be terminated if you hadn't met whatever moving benchmarks you were supposed to be meeting. And so you have termination hanging over you, which, yes, affects your relationship with the girls. It makes an unstable environment for the students. Now, I don't think they knew that this was coming, but it is unstable for them to lose someone all of a sudden as they're creating a new relationship freshman year in a brand new school district that we've already said is high achieving and is going to be very different from all these 80 schools funneling in. And you are a core person for them. So it creates instability and insecurity and change for them if you're suddenly removed mid-school year and you don't even know if it's coming to be able to prep them because you haven't. I mean, this is a mess. And the mental load that this would put on a person to be living in this situation, because this is also a loss of income for your family and a potential loss of career for you and your family. All of this is significant. May I also bring in that, if you don't mind, and we could pull this out if you'd prefer it not being here, but you had at least one kiddo at the school at this time, correct?
Yeah, I had two daughters going to the school at the time. And so I also had an investment in the school and their education. So
Right.
yeah, the fact that I might be severed from the school did impact them. And I also had a freshman student coming up that I had to make a decision about whether he would go to the school or not.
Yeah. So this is all
whether I was able to work there. Yeah.
right. And so I just wanted to highlight, this is incredibly unhealthy. This is a heavy burden for someone to be carrying for months and months. And ultimately, because someone just doesn't have the time to look at the evidence to make a decision, that feels like cruel and unusual punishment. It's like a form of cruelty towards another. I know that, gosh, I just think of examples where I've interviewed someone and then, things get busy. You can't get back to people right away. And I'm like, I even know, like in a scenario like that, I'm thinking, I know this person is on pins and needles. Like, wait, like I know I'm about to hire them, but they don't know I'm about to hire them. So let me at least send them something to give it, just this awareness of what other people are sitting in. Just because we know more, we have a position of power or authority. It's like, we're going to use that power and authority to be kind to one another, to have compassion, to make sure that others are cared for. That's what we should be doing. And it sounds like that's what their values actually state that they believe in, and yet they weren't actually living it out. And you were bearing the consequence of that. And potentially these girls too, ultimately.
Right. And nobody was following up with this individual for what he was doing. The academic dean, when I talked to her, I said, why aren't you stepping in? Why aren't you saying anything? And she kind of said, well, this is his kind of deal. And I'm here just to watch the process and be supportive of him. And I was just like, but who's supportive of me? Who's going to say this isn't right? Who could do a little coaching just of him? I get it. He's in a new position. He doesn't know. He's learning this new arm of what we offer at the school. He wasn't asking questions. He wasn't seeking first to understand what we were about. He was coming in order to, bring change. And I don't know if it was to put his own people in or what his ultimate goal was here. But I don't think his ultimate goal was ever to restore me within the organization. I think he wanted me out and he wanted me to make that decision for myself. And he was going to make it hell until that happened.
So how did it end?
I didn't want to leave. I was very broken in these meetings. I was very discouraged. I continued to perform. And in December, I had a meeting with them. And it had to be virtual, which is a little bit of a funny statement because we were all at the school and there weren't enough rooms for us to be virtual. So he was in his office. The academic dean was in her office, but I had to be in the classroom with my chair while he delivers the news to me that they all already knew that they were not going to extend the contract for me for another year. But they would let me teach until the end of the school year, for which I was thankful because I loved these girls and I wanted to finish well with them. And I will say I finished extremely well with them. I had a class of very diverse students, and we give this speech in the end, which we call my anthem. And it's about everything we've learned about ourselves as individuals throughout the year. I teach them how to deliver it as far as, an outline, public speaking. We incorporate everything that we've learned about ourselves, personality tests and learning styles, and just a review of everything that makes each individual who they are. And then they proclaim it to the class. And when it was time for my final day to give these speeches, the boys' class next to us wanted to come in. For some reason, they were already done. And so I said to the speaker that was going to speak, is it okay if the boys are in here while you give your presentation? And she said, that's fine. She had such confidence by this point, and she just hit it out of the ballpark. And she declared who she was and what her heritage taught her and the things she was celebrating about how God had created her. And the boys were just like, wow, we never did anything like that. That was amazing. And then I dismissed the boys and, said goodbye to the girls and let them know that I wouldn't be able to return the coming year. And from what I know, they never had a hint of that before the end. And I just thanked them for being who they were. And I said I would keep an eye on them as they continued to grow and mature. And I would hope to be there for graduation. It's very difficult for me to go back to the school anymore because of the trauma that's happened. So even while my girls were still there and I needed to go back for different things, it just was really difficult to be there because of so much of the abuse that took place there.
Yeah.
And so, while I love my fellow faculty and staff, the administration just never got it, and they never saw the wounding that they caused. So I don't know if I'll make it back for their graduation or not, but I did need to go to my own daughter's graduation, which was last year. And she got the highest, or maybe, it depends whether you call that valedictorian or this next award, the highest, but she got the overall, what we would hope a graduate of this school looked like. And as they were reading all the qualities that she had that earned her that award, I thought to myself, you know what, I have those same qualities and I instilled those in her. And where you could not see those as leadership, I know I passed those on to not only my daughter, but the students that I taught. And that was the end of my experience at that school.
When you look back now, Erin, what do you think were actually the main tenets of the culture for this school?
Well, they proclaimed that they wanted to be a school of excellence, but they didn't operate that way. I think they were really focused on protecting each other in leadership, not speaking up against one another or questioning each other, which I think makes a product stronger, to question one another and to do it in a way that's kind of like, here's a question I have, and then you move on. Like, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just like, I would expand this by doing this. They don't do any of that. They just let individuals in their silos do whatever they want. And once I left the school, I found out that this had happened to at least 12 to 20 other individuals. And I started to collect stories about what they were doing and how they had handled these people. And it was just so eye-opening for me to see the destruction. And one of the areas that they really seemed to have a pattern is when it would be strong women that would come into the organization. They really questioned them and doubted them and tried to break them down. And so that really discouraged me, because these women were bringing their best of who they were, and they had had careers before in which they were highly successful, just as I had. And then they came into this school and just were broken down for not having what the school needed or wanted them to offer. So that was really discouraging to hear and watch, but it's just really opened my eyes to abuse in religious organizations. And often we read books like A Place Called Tove, or When the Narcissist Comes to Church, or any of those books that talk about why this is happening and who are the instigators of this. But there's not a lot of books that talk about the victims. And so I want my voice to be heard as, this is what it does to the individual. And do you see what you're doing to God's children, who He has created and crafted to bring their best to the table? And you're telling them that they can't be part of the body? It's so countercultural to what Scripture says and to who we should be as Christians. So I want my voice to be part of the solution, as far as no more. This is not okay. And so I don't know where I'll be able to share that voice, but I'm beginning with you today.
Yeah. And something I want to emphasize for everyone is, if someone, Erin, if your experience had happened in a secular organization, it would still be wrong and it would still be a problem. It happening in a Christian organization adds another layer to it that is, we cannot deny it. We can't get around it. This impacts how we view our brothers and sisters, how we believe they view us, our connection with the church, as in being the larger body of Christ, can lead us to having questions about God. I mean, this is wrongful treatment. And it was done by people who are saying that they're Christian and they're running a Christian organization. They're saying this organization is founded and run on biblical values, on biblical ethics. And that is then confusing when we have an experience like yours. And we cannot just chalk it up to a bad work experience when it is in a Christian environment. It goes way deeper and it reaches way wider for that reason. And I'm wondering if you'd want to speak to what that was like for you, again, in relationship to the church, Christianity, your faith, the Lord.
Yeah. So I really viewed my role in the organization as being part of the body. Like we were all working under the headship of Jesus Christ. And so I was just a contributing member. I was maybe a fingernail. I don't know. But I was really chopped out of that body. And that was what was so hurtful. And it's created a very dysfunctional body for them. I really feel like when they lost me, they lost a contributing member of a healthy body. But that didn't matter to them, because what mattered is that they could preserve their own positions and not be threatened by other individuals in the organization who were adding value. I don't know why it happened to me. Some people say, maybe they were threatened or were concerned, that I was a threat to their positions. I told them in the process, I don't want your positions, and they said, well, that's good to hear. So I don't know what that means, but I really did not want to do their roles. I trusted them to be in those positions and offering those services. But when they came to me with these concerns and was like, who can I talk to? Like, who can I make this right with? Which is also a biblical perspective. And the leader said, well, we don't want you talking to anyone, because when you talk to people, you just make things worse. And again, that would have been a really healthy thing to do, to talk to somebody and ask their forgiveness if there's anything you've done to hurt or harm them. But no, in their perspective, just don't talk to each other. We will play this out from the top. And it was so destructive.
Well, and that sounds more like a desire to control the narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was that definitely happened. I wish I would have at the time thought about asking them to bring in an organization from the outside, because what happens is in these systems, they don't even see where they're sick. They don't see the disease. And you really need an organization from the outside to come in and observe what's going on. And I wish I would have asked for that. I'm not sure they would have done it because this works for them. But I think if they want to be a healthy organization going forward, that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, and we've encouraged that in different situations through beEmboldened. And there's definitely a reluctance, which makes sense. And yet, if we're really desiring to ensure that we are caring well for one another and that we're looking at potential blind spots, I don't know why we wouldn't. And so it does make me question what the overall real agenda or goal is for leadership if they are resistant to a step like that. And I'm wondering, how has this experience shaped you over the years since you were terminated?
It's been difficult. I knew who I was before I went into that organization, but that organization really changed my narrative. And while I would love to block out everything they said, there are times where I question, am I a good teacher? Do I have something to offer? Can I make a difference? And on good days, I remind myself of all those positive words of encouragement that I did receive. And I still have the softball standing on my shelf. And I remind myself, no, you were making a difference and you do make a difference. But that narrative is still in there. I don't know how to completely heal from that. I think there's friends who wish that I would just get over it. And it's really made me realize how trauma works. Yeah. That you can't control the timeline of trauma. And the other day I was doing a human resource training for another job that I have, just a little part-time job. And it was a sexual harassment training. And who would have thought it was a trigger for me? But it was a trigger because I saw behavior that was so wrong that mirrored what happened to me at this school. And then in this training, they would show you how to do it right. And it just made me so sad that we couldn't have figured out how to do it right. I wish they would have had this training and applied it and made a difference in my life and the lives of others that they harmed along the way. So it's funny where those triggers come from. I'm still looking for full-time work, so trying to figure out where God might plant me next. But for right now, I'm grateful for the time I had and for everything that was taken away from me. I do feel like God has restored little pieces with blessings. I don't know if he'll ever really play out vengeance on the group that did this. You know, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And I don't want God's wrath to come down on these individuals, but I do want them at some point to be held accountable and to recognize what they are doing to destroy God's children, his sheep. You know, I think of that passage in Matthew that it talks about Jesus turning and looking on the people and being filled with compassion because they're like sheep without a shepherd. And I think that's what's happening in some of these environments where the employees are being destroyed by the leadership because those aren't being shepherds for them. Those are being wolves in sheep's clothing. And I think there will be an accountability at some point for those individuals. And I hope they come to recognize it sooner rather than later and seek repentance.
Absolutely. And if you were to offer a word of caution to your faith-filled colleagues across the globe, so speaking to other people who are in organizations in hopes of them never finding themselves in a position like you found yourself in at no fault of your own, what would you want them to be aware of, or what would you want them to consider?
Like, would say overall, I never want you to play small to try to become what somebody else wants you to be. So I don't know if you can know that before you go into an organization, but be true to yourself and who God's created you to be, because you are a contributing member of the body of Christ. So I'm not going to ask you to be any different than who you are. I think this was an excellent organization to work for and to go into it if it had been a healthy organization. Some things I might watch for in the future because I'm a little bit fragile maybe when it comes to Christian organizations is, are there women in leadership? Are there opportunities for people to be lifted up and for this to be a place of encouragement? What are the metaphors of the organization? Like if it was we're all a family sort of a metaphor, I might encourage my Christian brothers to run from that organization because the problem with families is that they don't hold people accountable a lot of times. And in organizations, we need to hold each other accountable. So watch for the metaphors that they're using. They might sound good up front, but make sure that they are really true to what they say they esteem. Like if I would have looked at this culture document before going into the school, and I did, I was on board with all of it. That's great. Let's do it. But they didn't live it out. How would I know that until I was within the organization? And that's what other people who have run into this organization have also experienced is once they're in, they see what's really happening. And some are bold enough to get out of it themselves. I'm not sure I could have stepped out of it myself because I loved what I was doing so much and I loved serving these girls. But maybe God spared me from something that he didn't want me to be part of.